Wales, steeped in myth and legend, is an ancient land of proud and fiercely independent people. Coast at Harlech, the mountains run down to the sea in Cardigan Bay. Harlech has been immortalised in song and story, for it's here that local men resisted the Saxon hordes pouring in from England. Its imposing castle, built by Edward I of England in the 13th century on the site of a Celtic fortress, was the last to fall to a siege by Oliver Cromwell's men in the Civil War with Charles I. Its wind-swept battlements command a view across Tramadoc Bay to the Llyn Peninsula. British Rail sprinters carry visitors to the area from all corners of the United Kingdom and overseas. Far across the bay from Harlech stands another castle at our next stop, Criccieth. The castle was established around 1230 AD, in the time of Llewellyn the Great. Sacked and burnt in 1404 by Owen Glendower, it was never rebuilt. A typical Welsh seaside resort, Criccieth boasts fine hotels, and its rail and road links make it a good centre from which to tour the area. 2 miles away is the small village of Llanstwmdwy. One of Britain's famous men, David Lloyd George, spent much of his early life here in this tiny house with his mother and her brother. In 1916, he became the 36th Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and is remembered for his part in establishing the League of Nations by signing the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. At the end of his career, he returned to the village and spent many hours sitting in this tranquil spot, which now marks the site of his grave, overlooking the River Dwyfor. Travelling east from Criccieth, the major town of the area is Porthmadog. It's here the journey to the small slate mining community of Blaenau Ffestiniog will begin. Once, 2 railways, both at 1 foot 11.5 inches gauge, ran from Porthmadog into the Welsh mountains to serve the newly built port. Opposite the British Rail station stands the Welsh Highland Railway. In 1923, this line ran 22 miles through the dramatic mountain scenery of Snowdonia to Dinas near Carnarvon. Sadly, in 1937, the line closed and the stock was sold. In 1961, a group of railway enthusiasts formed a society dedicated to the revival of the railway. Today, through their volunteer efforts, the railway runs a regular service on the first 3/4 of a mile of line that's working its way back towards Bethgelert. On the seaward side of Porthmadog is the harbour. The proud sailing ships which once carried slate across the seas have been replaced by pleasure yachts. Across the harbour, the Ffestiniog railway has its terminus and headquarters at the harbour station. Every year, in springtime, the Ffestiniog Railway holds a gala weekend, when all the steam locomotives in running order, plus many visiting engines, can be seen in action. The main locomotive sheds and workshops for the railway are across the Glaslyn estuary at Boston Lodge. For the gala weekend, a special early morning photographic session had been organised to allow the public to watch the locomotives being prepared for their day's work. Visiting locomotive Rishra is also being prepared for its part in the gala. Rishra, built by Bagley and Burton-on-Trent in 1912, is possibly the smallest industrial locomotive ever exported from Britain. It spent most of its life in India before being repatriated and restored in 1971 by M.G. Satow, the present owner. In the yard at Boston Lodge, Rishra is dwarfed next to one of the famous Ffestiniog double Fairlie locomotives, Earl of Merioneth. Rishra can normally be seen in active service on the Leighton Buzzard narrow gauge railway. Prepared for their day's work, Linda and Mountaineer are dispatched across the Cobb, an impressive seawall built by William Maddox in 1811 as part of a land reclamation scheme. This man-made causeway links Boston Lodge, named after Maddox's parliamentary constituency, to the harbour station. In another siding of the yard, visiting engine Challoner, a rare vertical boiler 040 locomotive built by De Winton in 1877, gives footplate rides to visitors. Inside the buildings are many displays and models, including this beautifully constructed O-gauge model steam railway. The workshops are also open to the public. The engineers demonstrating the new modern equipment used for construction and maintenance of all types of equipment and rolling stock. Another visitor to the gala is Russell, a 262 tank engine built by Hunslet in 1906 for the Porthmadog, Bethgelert and South Snowdon Railway, part of the Welsh Highland Railway. It worked this railway for 30 years until the line closed. Later, it worked for the Ministry of Supply in Oxfordshire, then moved to the Fales Tramway on the Isle of Purbeck, before spending 10 years in Towyn. On the 15th of April 1965, it returned to the Welsh Highland Railway after an absence of 29 years. Here, the Preservation Society restored it to its original appearance. During this gala weekend, Russell could be seen working the vintage trains and a regular shuttle between Minffordd and Porthmadog. In the harbour station at Porthmadog, Linda from the Penryn Quarries, built by Hunslet in 1893, converted to a 240 tender tank in 1970, is hard at work with Mountaineer, assembling the trains for the day. The Ffestiniog Railway Company was formed on the 23rd of May 1832, originally to bring slate from quarries some 13 miles away. The construction of the railway was by bargain men, using only simple hand tools, horses and black powder. The official opening took place on the 20th of April 1836. Sadly, the decline in the slate industry saw the closure of the railway on the 1st of August 1946. The 1950s, however, saw the first stirring of a new railway era with the dawn of the preservation movement, which brought professionals and amateurs together to run lines otherwise doomed to closure. It took 31 years of hard work and great determination to rebuild the line to its former glory. On the 23rd of May 1982, the first passenger train ran once again into Blaenau Ffestiniog station. The booking office does a busy trade on gala weekends, offering tickets from single to full weekend rovers. Not surprisingly, in 1987, the Ffestiniog won the Independent Railway of the Year award, sponsored by the publishers Ian Allen Limited. Before we begin a journey to Blaenau, let's take a look at a map of the line. From Porthmadog, the line crosses the Cobb to Boston Lodge, where it swings sharply northeast to Minffordd, which is to be our first stop. Mountaineer shunts the final set of coaches into place. The station complex also houses a well-stocked shop.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can I have that one, please?
Thank you. That is 450, please.
Right, thank you.
Next to the shop is a small restaurant and museum, an ideal place to relax and watch the coming and goings in this busy little station. Mountaineer, the locomotive that's to take us to Minffordd, seen here in action at various points on the line, is a 262 tank engine and was built by the American Locomotive Company at Paterson in New Jersey in 1917. It was originally constructed for the War Department light railways in France during World War I. It worked on the tramway de Pithiviers à Doury from 1935 until this closed in December 1964. The locomotive was donated to the Ffestiniog railway in 1967 and has been modified to meet the Ffestiniog loading gauge and converted to oil burning. Mountaineer can be seen on regular service trains throughout the year, and during the gala weekend took part in some interesting double heading, as we shall see later. It's now time to board the train. All doors are kept locked during the journey for safety reasons. Pulling out of the station in Porthmadog, the locomotive fights for traction, the slipping being skillfully controlled by the experienced driver. After travelling just 2 miles, we arrive at Minffordd station. Half a mile from the station stands the famous Italianate village of Porthmarion. During the gala weekend, vintage buses take over some of the regular services, providing an historic connection to the village. Set in 70 acres of subtropical woodland in a narrow valley that tumbles down to the estuary, Porthmarion provides ever-changing scenes of structural and natural beauty. The village was built by Sir Clough Williams-Ellis between 1925 and 1972. His concept being that a beautiful site could be developed without spoiling it. There's a top-class hotel in the grounds, and the many cottages can be hired as holiday accommodation. At Minffordd Station, the gala weekend is in full swing. An antique pianola provides the background music, and all the staff are dressed in period costume. Simplex Mary Ann, built in 1917, is at one end of a shuttle train to Minffordd Yard, where the railway is holding an open day with many attractions. At the other end is the railway's oldest working locomotive, Prince. Built in 1863, Prince was one of the first locomotives used on the Ffestiniog railway, replacing the horses which used to haul the slate wagons from the harbour to the quarries. Amongst the displays is this recently purchased diesel locomotive, Harlech Castle, which is used on permanent way maintenance trains. One of the most popular attractions is the opportunity to drive a steam locomotive. The engine used is called Britomart and was built in 1899 in Leeds. Unlike all the other Ffestiniog railway locomotives, which have been converted to oil firing, Britomart is still coal-fired. Running the full length of the yard is a 7¼ inch gauge line offering rides to both young and old behind these superbly constructed model locomotives. This is a scale model of a 2-foot gauge Darjeeling Himalayan railway locomotive. In the sidings just above the yard, preparations are being made for the running of a gravity slate train. The railway was originally designed and constructed to have a down gradient from Blaenau Ffestiniog to Porthmadog, which allowed the fully loaded slate wagons to run, by gravity alone, controlled only by brakemen, the full 13.5 miles to the harbour at Porthmadog, where the ships were waiting to be loaded. Once in Porthmadog and unloaded, the empty wagons were hauled back up the line to Blaenau by horses. The introduction of the steam locomotive transformed the speed and efficiency of this operation, and on special occasions, the railway likes to recreate the spectacle of years gone by with the running of a gravity slate train. Unfortunately, due to alterations in the track layout further up the line, it's impossible to run by gravity the whole distance from Blaenau Ffestiniog. Prince hauls the slate train to just below the next station at Penryn. Here it's released, and after a gentle push, runs by gravity back to Minffordd Yard. The only control the quarrymen had over these wagons was a simple handbrake system. But with careful synchronization, the heavy train of slate is brought gently to a halt. Returning from duty on the slate trains, Prince takes over the yard shuttle service once again. Visit to the yard over, we can return to Minffordd Station, where one of the famous double fairley locomotives is arriving from Porthmadog with the vintage train. The double fairley locomotive was originally developed for this railway to cope with the increasing traffic in the late 1860s. Technically known as a double-bogie articulated locomotive, its development and subsequent success on the line marked a milestone in steam railway technology. The steam is transmitted to a pair of driving bogies by flexible couplings, allowing these long-framed engines to negotiate the sharp curves on this railway. One of the original fairlies remains in working order today, Merthin Emrys, and is joined by the Earl of Merioneth, built at Boston Lodge by the present company in 1979. Both locomotives were in action over the weekend, running either on their own or on longer trains, double-heading with one of the smaller locomotives. Merioneth can be seen to best advantage amidst the glorious Welsh countryside. From Minforth, the railway climbs steadily to the next station at Penryn. Linda, double-heading with Mountaineer, leads the train into the small station. After a short stop, the two locomotives depart to cross the first of 4 level crossings on the line, the other 3 being on the section between Tanygrishow and Blaenau Ffestiniog. From here to Tanybulk, the line runs mostly through forest and cuttings, the walls of which threaten to scrape the sides of the trains at times. Tanybulk, 7.5 miles from Porthmadog, is a regular passing point for up and down trains. At the upper end of the station, the locomotives immediately encounter a steep gradient. Struggling, the combined power of the two locomotives hauls the fully laden train out of the station. valley, the train approaches one of the technical marvels of the railway. At the next station, Ffestiniog, the engineers who were reconstructing the line faced a major problem. They couldn't use the original route to Blaenau because the Central Electricity Generating Board had purchased the track bed from Ffestiniog to Ffestiniog and constructed a reservoir which flooded it. This meant the railway had to climb higher to bypass the reservoir and join up with the original track bed at Ffestiniog station for the continuing journey into Blaenau Ffestiniog. The original line at Ffestiniog continued straight on and through the old Molewind tunnel. To gain height, the new line had to be constructed in an open spiral, unique in Britain, before continuing through a new tunnel higher up the mountainside. The spiral can be seen to its best if we watch Merthin Emrys on its descent to Porthmadog. The first part is hidden amongst the trees, but once in the open, it's clear to see the line crossing over itself before swinging around behind the small hill. Emerging once more, the train completes its 360-degree turn to run into the small station. The route of the old track bed can still be seen beneath the newly constructed embankment. Many of the original timber sleepers can still be seen. Returning now to our journey. Having passed through the new Molewind tunnel, the trains sweep around the reservoir at Ffestiniog before arriving at the station of the same name. The power of the humble mountain stream has been tamed and used to great effect here in Wales by the development and construction of pumped storage hydroelectricity generating stations. High in the mountains above Blaenau Ffestiniog, the Central Electricity Generating Board have built a reservoir. This serves as a large water tank for the power station far below. Great care was taken in the design and use of materials so that it made least environmental impact. Local stone was used, and only 1/3 of the building is visible above ground. At peak periods of demand, this station is capable of delivering 360 megawatts of electricity into the national grid in under 60 seconds, generated by 4 enormous turbines. At full output, water leaves the upper reservoir, 213 meters higher up the mountain, at a rate of 500 million liters per hour. The power station was opened in 1963 by Her Majesty the Queen. Visitors are welcomed and provided with guided tours 7 days a week. The final section of the Ffestiniog railway from Tanni Grisiau to Blaenau Ffestiniog runs between the houses on the outskirts of town, before arriving at the station shared with British Rail. Man-made mountains of slate waste, still bearing the scars of rope-worked inclines, surround the town. From the centre, a local bus service carries visitors to the slate mines at Clechfeth, on the outskirts of Blaenau Ffestiniog. Here, an exhibition, guided tour, and practical examples demonstrate in graphic detail how slate was mined. It's still a hard-working quarry, and basic principles still apply. Hard hats supplied by the tour guides must be worn at all times. The small battery-powered train is well protected. The roof of the tunnel, in places, only inches above the caging. Once inside, a guide explains how, in almost total darkness, miners drilled the rock for blasting, using only primitive equipment.
So these are the drilling marks, as you can well see. So this instrument would be called a jumper. And this would be the way he would drill his hole. That's it. So I have shown you how he would drill his hole. So he would use black powder or gunpowder, a fuse, a bit of paper, some fine dust. Then he would use this rod, which is called a stamper. And as you can well see, it is made out of brass. He had to stamp everything down tightly into the hole. But if he used any other kind of instrument, it would cause a spark. There could be an explosion.
Static exhibitions inside the mine demonstrate the harsh conditions miners used to work under.
Just now,
Emerging once more into the daylight, visitors can watch an exhibition of slate cutting by a true expert. Once split, the slates have to be cut down to the required size. Here, our journey on the Ffestiniog must end with a return trip to Porthmadog. Time to reflect on the places we've visited and the things we've seen on our journey from Tremadog Bay to Blaenau Ffestiniog. Rand's Video Group of Companies presents RV Television, specialists in the production of railway and tourism video programs. Established over 20 years ago, Rand's Video has always kept abreast with modern video developments. Technology that has allowed them to construct their own 1-inch broadcast standard facility in the heart of the beautiful English countryside. Their railway films cover a wide range of railway and travel topics from around Europe. Switzerland, a country built around railways. To many, a giant train set, both narrow and standard gauge running side by side. We begin our travels around Switzerland in Lucerne, the start of the Brunig Railway, which climbs with the help of rack and pinion over the Brunig Pass to Interlaken at the foot of the mighty Jungfrau mountain range. From Interlaken, Faszination Lötschbergbahn follows the route of the Bern-Lötschberg-Simplon Railway to Brig in Canton Valais. The Bern-Lötschberg-Simplon Railway recently celebrated 75 years of running with a series of impressive steam parades featured in the programme 75 Years of the BLS. The main north-south route across Switzerland features in Faszination Gotthardbahn. Mainline Federal Railways trains spiral and tunnel their way from Lucerne to Lugano, near the Italian border. In the southeastern corner of the country, Chur is the capital of Canton Graubünden. From here, the Rhätische Railway spreads out a network of interconnecting meter-gauge lines through spectacular alpine scenery. In total, 5 programs cover this network, providing unrivaled coverage of such famous trains as the Glacier and Bernina Expresses. As with all RV television productions, the programs are produced with the full cooperation of the railways, providing unique camera positions and angles. Not only do our programs give in-depth insights of the railways, but a special series of Swiss railway journeys shows the many and varied tourist attractions of the areas linked together by the featured railways. From mountain ascents by rail and cable car to local cheese making, Swiss Railway Journeys combines tourism and rail travel beautifully. The ancient town of Lucerne features in the purely tourist program Lucerne, Lakes and Mountains. A journey of a different kind is offered aboard the William Tell Express. Paddle steamers and luxury express trains convey passengers from Lucerne to Lugano. Two mountain railway programs. The first features the only regular steam service in Switzerland, the Brienz-Rothorn-Bahn. In the second program, we travel on the oldest rack railway in Europe, the Witznau-Rigi Railway. Europe has such a large variety of railways that RV Television now produce a regular video magazine program, Railways Around Europe. Packed full of interesting railway features, each edition covers over 6 different subjects. Turning our attention now to Great Britain with 2 preserved steam specials. The first celebrating 125 years of steam on the narrow-gauge Ffestiniog railway in Wales. The second features one of England's most beautifully preserved railways, the Keighley and Worth Valley. Finally, a trip through the Scottish Highlands from Edinburgh to the Kyle of Lochalsh, stopping off along the way to sample local whisky distilling and, of course, Highland games. Looking to the future, RV Television will continue to bring you the best in railway and tourism documentary programs of the highest standard.